you.
And the next presentation I have really been looking forward to. It's called Scaling in Africa, Stories from the Coalface. I want you to give a warm welcome in the living rooms around the world to Bukhle Groslar. Not completely sure I got that right. The only one I know that has an entire video on YouTube on how to pronounce the name. So Bukhle is JUMO's Chief Executive Officer for Africa region and Pakistan. She has held senior leadership roles in the financial services, technology, retail, and tourism sectors. She's also worked across sub-Saharan Africa as well as in Asia and European markets. So what we think is really interesting here is that JUMO is powering a new wave of financial tools. JUMO is building the world's next generation financial services technology to empower emerging markets entrepreneurs with a whole new world of choice. Sounds fascinating, and I, for one, cannot wait to hear anything more. To hear more. So please welcome Bukhle from JUMO. I'm sorry if I didn't get that entirely right.
You did a really fantastic job and pronounced my name beautifully as well. Which, by the way, my name actually means beauty in Zulu. So beautifully done. Thank you so much. I am incredibly excited to be speaking with you here today. I have so much to say. I am conscious of the fact that I only have about 20 minutes. And, ideally, I would also like to leave some time at the end for questions. I think that, one of the reasons I'm excited is just the point at our journey that we are at right now. We've reached over 16 million customers, originated close to $2 billion in loans on our platform. We are live across 6 markets. We've learned a few things. So it's a good time to be talking. I'm also incredibly excited by the fact that this track today is about Africa, because I am a huge Afro optimist. So you will forgive my kind of unbridled optimism as I speak. I have a lot of faith and hope in the ingenuity of our continent. I will try and balance that enthusiasm, by really talking about some of the realities that we faced building and scaling a business in Africa. Some of those things include working across really fragmented markets, navigating a swiftly changing regulatory landscape, and also, trying to build a product that both our partners, telcos and banks love, as well as end users, while at the same time trying to chart a path to profitability. You've already heard a little bit around what JUMO is. You can visit our website, JUMO.WORLD. But to maybe just summarize that, we are a full stack, full technology stack for building and running your financial services. So banks and telcos come to us because of our data engine, our end-to-end banking technology, and also because we have a really flexible operating platform which we support with managed services. We have development teams in Cape Town, South Africa, in Nairobi, Kenya, and also in Porto, Portugal. As I said, our partners are banks and mobile network operators, and they're using our platform to offer lending and savings products to individuals across and entrepreneurs across Africa and Pakistan. And part of the reason for this is that they're able to have unprecedented reach into previously invisible segments. And the platform has really been built for an emerging market context. And I'll get into some of that when I talk about the lessons that we've learned as we've been building this business. And a key part of building this business has been also really answering the question of how does one make people, individuals and entrepreneurs who have been invisible to the formal economy, visible to that economy. So if we move to the next slide. Great. Next slide. I think that was the video slide. If you move one more. Great, perfect. So when you want to scale a business, one of my fundamental beliefs is that your inspiration matters and is often indicative of whether or not what you're building is in fact scalable at all, right? And I think that with the JUMO story, it was inspired by wanting to create scalable impact. So this was an entrepreneurial ambition, yes, but more than that, it was really wanting to have an impact on a problem. And I think the problem that you're solving often also decides whether or not whatever you're building will scale. And one of the ways in which you can think about this is the problem underpinned by big numbers? So I listened to a couple of the panel presentations before this, and I think a lot of the panelists really alluded to this issue of financial exclusion. And when you look at the numbers that underpin this, you can see very quickly that there is an opportunity to build a business that scales here. So in 2015, when JUMO was born out of this entrepreneurial ambition to have huge impact and born in the cloud, at that point, I think we had about 2 billion people financially excluded in the world, and the majority of those were in Africa, right? The other thing that we had going at that time was that mobile money was in its ascendance. It was moving beyond the M-Pesa story and really starting to grow in Tanzania and Uganda. And you had all of this money starting to move. You had some liquidity, but you still also had the usual challenges around access to finance, right? So you still had a growing micro and small entrepreneurs credit gap, right? So another big number. And then also, well, sometimes the numbers can be small depending on which way you look at it. But the other problem that we also had on the African continent was that under 8% of adults were covered by credit bureaus, which is to say only 8% had financial identities and could, essentially access credit. So what we did is we really leaned into a problem with big numbers. The other really interesting thing which we did, which I think really gave us momentum, is that we were very scrappy, right? And we thought creatively, because we said we need to actually build for the lowest common denominator. In our markets, what that meant was that we had to make sure that our lending and saving technology could work on the very basic feature phone, right? Because cost of internet is extremely high in Africa. And also, if you want to reach a lot of people, many people were still at that time, and even now on the feature phone, you often find in a lot of large African cities, even the professionals carry a feature phone and a smartphone, which is quite interesting. So being scrappy and working with what existed gave us a lot of that early momentum. And the other thing is, we were, I think as a team, people who could really see the potential in the problem, right? We spent a lot of time really early on going, what could the anatomy of growth in these markets actually look like? What are the necessary conditions for our model to succeed? And where those conditions don't exist, how can we create them, right? So an early problem, for instance, that we realized was that our cost of capital, so lending on balance sheet, was just way too expensive for the type of customer that we wanted to reach. And so we had to innovate our business model and think about, how can we bring banks in and how can we make the economics of that work? We had to understand banks in order to figure out how to onboard them. So we created the necessary conditions for ourselves to succeed by essentially becoming a multi-sided platform. So really, I think our story has been one of being inspired to create impact. It has been one of leaning into the challenge and into a challenge with big numbers, into being scrappy around solutioning, and also in seeing the potential in the problem. And, for us, one of the things we often say is that financial exclusion is definitely a supply side issue, not a demand side issue, right? We do not see a problem with finding customers, hence us having already served 16 million of them and having over 100 million customers under integrated coverage, which means they can actually have access to our platform. And, we also realize that there is an urgency to what we're doing, because if you look at the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, you will realize that a lot of those goals are really underpinned by access to finance, right? You cannot have no poverty, zero hunger, gender equity without really addressing some of the fundamental issues around economic or financial exclusion. So that is really kind of the backstory of JUMO and how we approach the world, I suppose. But, I'm conscious that I was asked to give you, share stories and lessons from the coalface. And one of the things that is typical when you're asked to do that is you should have like a number, like, 4 ways to do this, or, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to quickly share 4 lessons from our 5 years operating across the African continent. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll get into lesson number 1. That's actually Dania, one of our Zambian customers. Cool. So the first and most important lesson, and maybe this just resonates with me because I'm a social scientist, is you've got to design for the lives that customers actually live. And I think what that really requires is creativity, certainly, collaboration, but I would also say humility. So in our case, like I said, we met the customers where they were. We designed for the feature phone. We were also conscious in the way in which we built both lending and saving product of how our customers actually earn money. So it's small sums. A lot of them have variable and unpredictable income. All of that has an impact into what features you design, but also, we had to think about their full life context. So most of you would have heard that Africa is a young continent. What many people don't also then talk about is that what you have is a lot of young people who are self-employed, who are really a part of the sandwich generation where they are starting their own families, but are also supporting older parents or extended family. And so they will often have, emergencies. And the way in which you design things like grace periods in your credit product are really important, or giving them mechanisms to communicate to you when there is a willingness to repay, but really a lack of ability. And, so that you can then also correct the consequences of that non-payment accordingly. So really, in every aspect of the way that we design our products, we think about meeting the customers where they are. And sometimes, as I alluded to previously, that means a business model change, right? As in the case of bringing on banks, and we work with some big banks like Absa and EcoBank. But also decisions we've made in our business model include, deciding to partner with telcos like MTN, Tigo Millicom, Airtel, Telenor in Pakistan. And yes, we could have gone direct to customer, but because we want to meet the customers where they are, and where the customers are is mobile networks, that's where we are as well, right? And then obviously, some of the obvious stuff for this audience is use the tools that exist in order for you to control costs. And for us, that is cloud infrastructure, which, is, I think, it's normal for fintechs born kind of post 2015. And then I guess, the other aspect of meeting your customers where they are is that sometimes it's also doing things which are less obvious. So, a lot of times, for instance, when it comes to regulators, people are like, well, if they don't call you, don't call them. I do think that when you're working in a space where you want to include vulnerable segments, actually that cannot be the case. So a part of what you need to do is to go to the regulator and be part of the financial inclusion strategy. And then I think the other thing, which may be less obvious around meeting the customers where they are, is rethink who your competitor is. So, if you're doing lending or savings, don't assume that your competitor is a bank launching a DFS product, because typically it's not, right? The customer that you're targeting might decide that the best store of value for them is not a digital savings account, but rather buying a goat or a cow. So you need to understand why that is. And, if your savings product does not stack up and, doesn't seem to the customer to be better than the store of value in a goat, then you've got a problem. I spent a while ago, a couple of months, just doing a study on money lenders across East Africa. Why? Because yes, you can kind of look at them and go, so evil, they're extorting customers, or you can understand why it is that customers actually choose to use those types of products. Lesson number 2, move on to the next slide. So lesson number 2 for me is really that success comes to those who venture out. And there is a saying, the map is not the territory. I think that is true. You need to go out and see. And if I map our successes to date, I think that you can attribute them to that. We went out to see. We ventured out, right? So right from the outset, we went into multiple markets because we wanted to prove the model and also achieve product fit in multiple markets, right? So as I've said, we're currently live in 6 markets. We've got 4 markets coming online. I see they forgot Cameroon, but it's there in the next 9 to 12 months. And what that did is it gave us a huge headache in the sense that we were right kind of from our infancy dealing in multi-currency, multi-jurisdiction, multicultural ecosystems with partners of varying maturity and market dominance. But that was okay because we learned our lessons really, really quickly. And I think by paying our school fees early, we were also able to understand very quickly what was actually transferable, which is something you cannot just grasp from, doing desk research. And then we were able to figure out what we needed to really invest in, right? So, the map is not the territory, go see. And I think also linked to this idea of venturing out and going to see and being in motion is this idea that, if you're out there and you are consistent in what you're doing and pursuing, you will build momentum. And I really think that momentum is ultimately going to turn into some really great results. And I think results that will also stand the test of time, right? I think for us, obviously, COVID has been an amazing test for the work that we do. And it has been incredibly gratifying first to see customer feedback around the fact that our service remained open because we had great confidence in our risk scoring and they were able to access the service at a time that they really, really needed it. And I think also gratifying to see the feedback from our bank partners over this time that, they were surprised to see some of the best performance to date on our platform. And I think that is because of all of the work that we've been doing over the past couple of years and really going out there, being at the coalface. Lesson number 3. Thank you. So lesson number 3 is maybe an obvious one, but still worth stating nonetheless, is that, when you are in the business of crafting the future, as many technology companies, want to be or strive to be, it does mean that, you need to be pushing boundaries, but also really, I suppose, crafting things for a future that is yet unseen. So sometimes it may seem like, really, if you build it, will they come? And, this might seem a little bit at odds to the first lesson, which I shared around, building for the lives that customers actually live, because that feels very much like being in the now, right? And having this radical focus on reality. But I really think it's a counterbalance more than a contradiction. And I think that, for the future sustainability of your business, clearly you do need to take some big bets. But at the same time, as some people have alluded to in earlier panels, it is true that, capital is a limited resource, and especially, when it comes to investment in Africa. And so there is a level of caution that's required. But if we come back to the point of this, which is really what are the lessons that we've learned, one of the things that, I've certainly taken out of our journey and just looking at our different experiences is that it is okay, to push those boundaries and take those big bets. But if you have a good and very deep understanding really of the systems that are underpinning the economies that you're actually building for, right? And so what I mean by that is that you need to be responding to something which you are seeing, and often those can be quite large systemic shifts, right? And I think, if I look at our current product roadmap, there's a lot in there that we are responding to that is shifting. And some of it may seem slow, but I think that you do kind of reach this tipping point where it will change very quickly, and you want to be there and you want to be ready to respond to those customer needs. So, one of the things is you're seeing really this explosive growth of large African cities, right? Because I think when you think about Africa and reaching people in really dense environments, sure, think about countries, but really, really make sure you think about cities, right? And so what are we seeing in these cities? We're seeing increased connectedness. We're seeing high density, like I said, some shifting demographics, and this has huge implications for addressability. Like if I zoom into Ghana, which is one of our largest markets, you're seeing that, mobile money is starting to grow outside of its kind of original birthplace in East Africa, right, into West Africa. In Ghana, in 2018, we saw just over 210 million Ghanaian shillings in mobile money transactions, right? Fast forward a year later, that number was 780 million, right? So the shift is happening, and it is happening fairly quickly. Looking across East and West Africa, we have seen some mobile money ecosystems realizing something like 30% month-on-month growth in micro merchants starting to accept mobile payments, right? You're not seeing those kind of numbers with credit cards. During the COVID crisis, we saw how critical mobile money agents are. They're literally the backbone of the financial system across African markets where mobile money is used. And for us, it was great. It's great to kind of look at these numbers, because when we look at our roadmap, these are exactly the segments, whose value proposition we are improving and building upon. And it definitely looks like the future. The last lesson number 4, slide. Great. So the last lesson is really that, always be checking that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? I think, for us, when I kind of reflect on our journey, and it's been super interesting, you're always optimizing, right? You've got to do more with less. And you're always balancing or surfing this tension between scale and reach, and also reaching profitability, right? And all of the time, I think, we kind of come back to this and we go, if we want the whole to be greater than the sum of the parts, we need to stick to what is essential. We need to figure out what's core, what's non-core. We need to be sure that each part of our business model is contributing the absolute most that it can, right? So the mobile operator, what are they doing? Yes, we know what they're getting, right, which is second line of revenue, but what are they doing? Are they actively, adding services, whether it's G2P, cross-border remittances, etc. The same with the banks, right? Because we're really working here on lowering the cost of capital so that we can put some of that value back into the customer's hands. And, with savings products, we want to give customers, better interest rates. All of those things are really important, especially when you're operating in markets where there isn't a lot of public financial infrastructure, right? So we're always looking to make sure that those things are coming together in a way that is really meaningful. Great. So that is the last lesson, and I will just close on this note if we move to the next slide. So I think, there's some obvious things which are exciting about the work that we are doing. We're working in many historically unmapped markets, which is exciting. I think that we are delivering something which, is so important in the lives of our customers. When you have never had access to a service before, being able to have reliable access is great, being able to be given choice is even better. Being able to manage your financial affairs with the benefit of privacy promotes dignity, right, and confidence. So there's just so much that kind of sits in the work that we're doing, and we really believe as a business that we have this opportunity of our lifetime to connect African entrepreneurs to these financial products that they need. And it's a responsibility that we take very seriously, because entrepreneurs like the one in this picture, they go out there every day, right? They exchange their time and really their life force to make this money, to create these opportunities for themselves and their families. And we need to honor that in the work that we do. So, yes, it is about technology and data, and we've spoken extensively about that today. And yes, it is definitely about creating financial resilience, right, and building more sustainable economies across the continent, and we've spoken about that. And feature creation and breaking data silos, more openness, customer protection, all of these things matter. But it is also about these human lives. And I think that it's in thinking about them at this individual level that we will ultimately move the African continent forward, because, it's time, and the time is now. So those are some stories and lessons that we have learned at JUMO from the coalface. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for that presentation. That was very inspiring and interesting. I've just been checking out. It's not that I am looking at my phone, but it's just to see if there's any questions. Karen is saying, thank you for sharing your journey and your lessons with us. Really enjoyed your presentation. So thank you very much. It doesn't seem to be there doesn't seem to be many questions. So I will leave it with that, and for you to join your team and go on building a better business. So thank you very much.
Thank you.